Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. He's laughing at me already because I'm going to say his name wrong. I've got today a very special guest, a very good friend, is a teacher, he's been all over the world with me, all over the world with his teaching. He's got 2 books out, he's a family man, he's an amazing person. I just love him to pieces and I look up to him very much. He's taught me many a thing and I hope we get onto them things today. I've got today Martin Illingworth. I did it, I said it. Hello, how you doing?
Hello there, good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here, Martin. Now, Martin, we're in the craziest of times at the minute. We've got the coronavirus going on. We're all up in the air. I've had lots of debates been going on Facebook and lots of people getting mad at one another. We're in strange times. Your book's come out during these strange times. Have you found that as a positive? Have people been trying to get your book in and recommend it to other people? How's it been bringing it out during the time of Corona?
Well, the book is about the way that schools are a bit out of date in terms of the curriculum and the things that we ask kids to do. It came out in the end of March, I think, so just as we were all locked down. And in some ways, there's an irony there because my book's called Forget School, and we were all having to forget school because schools were shut. And I guess another positive is it has come at a time when people are able to spend a bit of time reading, and maybe in the case of teachers thinking about what they want to do when they return in September, although of course many of them have been working all the way through the lockdown, still going into school, working with key workers kids and working with vulnerable children. But also, of course, some of them are delivering lessons online, so kids are still getting some learning.
Have you seen these online classes? Have you been checking any of them out and how they're
I haven't, but I've had to deliver one myself. I did a guest lecture for Sheffield University for their teacher training course, and it was a new skill for me. It's not something that I've done before, and I reflect it's a bit weird because when you have a presentation and you're just sitting in your room whittering on over PowerPoint slides and you can't see your audience. Now and again one of them might ask a question and that question just comes out of the ether, out of the air. So that's interesting. And I also found that I went much slower than I thought I was going to do. So even somebody who's been teaching 100 years like me is having to learn new tricks as we move online.
It is weird because I've been on Zoom and even with the family we have a little quiz night every Saturday, but just the whole structure of it, and they want to talk, then you try to talk, and it all gets a bit messy. Like even this is a new way of communicating, really, like podcasting. I've really just been into listening to them for years now. For Joe Rogan, I really enjoy listening to. But I thought, I really want to discover my friends. I want to meet more people. I want to find out what's going on a bit more. But we could be having 100 people, one person. My nan's probably listening to this. But it is a new way of communicating again. And seeing all these little ways of people reaching out to one another cropping up, I find it really fascinating. And do you see that as a way that education might go? Being more online, being further away from the classroom?
Well, being in Britain at the moment, it's having to be until schools go back. And even when they do go back, I think kids won't go to school every day of the week. I think they might go in for a couple of days and then be working online the rest of the time. The school buildings aren't going to miraculously double in size so that we can halve the class sizes. So the kids are going to have to go in staggered shifts throughout the week, and that means, I think, that teachers will be asked to do online things. At university, at Sheffield, Hallam University, where I work, we've found that we've moved online for doing things like academic tutorials, and that might be something that stays after this pandemic is over. We might well, rather than asking people to come in for a tutorial with their tutor from, sometimes good distances for a 20-minute tutorial, we will probably keep using things like Zoom meetings. And the meetings have been fine. You've just got to learn. With my colleagues, I've had weekly meetings. You just got to learn that if you want to speak, you've got to put your hand up, like kids will have to do. And particularly with Zoom, the sound works better if everybody's muted and one person speaks, and then they put their hand up, whoever wants to speak next, pop the mute off, and then that person gets to speak. But again, it's all new. We're learning new things as we go.
Really, like you, even I'll be honest, at the start of this podcast, I slipped up about 3 times and I wanted to redo it and try it out again. And I'm learning how to talk over this sort of format now, because me, in the car, we go all over the country together and I can't shut up. I can imagine that moment, when I got the book out and it had like 10 greatest facts, and you must have just gone, oh no, not for hours. And
I'm much better informed about Wiltshire now, so that's good.
Thank God for that. I mean, I hope that's coming to one of your pub quizzes.
Not as yet, but I've got it stored away.
But yeah, it's something I really want to venture into, but you press play and nerves hit and things like that, and that happens with Zoom for me as well. Being online and knowing somebody's there, another side of my brain locks up, and it's like, oh, this is different. And it's learning a new language, sort of. You're learning a new way of just being. I
think it's partly because it's the permanence of it. It's that sense that you're recording something, that other people at other times will be listening to it, and that's where that adrenaline and those nerves come from. Is that sense of the third ear? There's not just you and me, but there's a third person out there.
I told you he's cool.
And,
he knows things.
And that will change the dynamics of the room. It changes the dynamics of the conversation, and of course you feel the need to get it right. And I think we're going to have to ease up on that, aren't we? We're going to have to ease up on ourselves, particularly when we're starting to use this medium as a means of conversation and a means of keeping in touch. I took part in an international Zoom meeting a couple of weeks ago, where there were speakers. We were investigating together what was happening in schools around the world. So somebody there from America and from India, and there was somebody from I think it was Slovenia, and they were having to instigate learning at a distance, online learning. And one of the problems that they found with doing this was that actually some of the children's houses didn't have electricity, so they were having to improve the grid and get people rigged up, and then lend the kids laptops so that they could join in. And that's something, the world is changing because of our move onto this fourth dimension. One of the things that the teacher from Slovenia had said that she hadn't foreseen when they moved on to digital learning, but actually makes sense, is that children who, when they were in school, got bullied, obviously we're no longer getting bullied because they're in their own homes, and the quality of their work went up and up and up. So I hadn't thought of that, but actually it's rather obvious that if you're not going to a building where you feel under pressure and you're always wondering about who's round the next corner, that the chance to actually grow and develop as a learner at home is much improved.
That when you said that, you do this to me sometimes, and I get goosebumps. That got me a little bit, because I had a horrendous time at school. I really didn't enjoy my journey, and one thing that really happened throughout all of it, actually, I was going to say mainly secondary school, but definitely happened in primary school, but the bullying was so strong, and it never got addressed, and that was one thing that really made me play up a lot of the time. And I never wanted to go to school, for starters, so that was a battle to get me there. But it was never questioned why. There was never like an extra well, why don't you want to go? They just think that's what kids say. But there was a huge underground bit of bullying going on. And if I had a safe space or somewhere I thought I was going to be nurtured, looked after, wanted to be, I think, yeah, my grades would have definitely been a different story anyway. So everything's got a byproduct, doesn't it? Like, people see things in a bad way and it's like, oh, they can't go to school, they won't have electricity. But them children will be thinking, oh, thank God I don't have to go to school. I'm in a safe space and they can learn in a...
I mean, that's one of the questions that I pose in Forget School. Would correspond to what you're talking about with your experience there. Rather than asking, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to go to school? They might, I think it's time to ask what's wrong with school. So we've got this. The adult generation just suspects. Well, we don't even suspect. We just send kids to school because that's what they do. So parents just send kids to school because that's what they do. And this is one generation is telling the next that by extension, it must be an important thing to go to school.
And the name of the title of the book, Forget School, did any people have their backs up straight away, like Forget School?
I hope so. Yeah. That's, I'm not really... That title came from Ian Gilbert, who's the Little Book of Thunks
Great guy.
He suggested that. We were throwing around titles, and I like that one. And it's got a couple of senses. It's partly what the young people that I interviewed. I was interviewing 20 to 30-year-olds who were, on the whole, self-employed or in jobs that were paying whilst they find their way towards being self-employed. It's what they were telling me, that actually most of the things they've learnt in school they've forgotten anyway. Which begs the question of, what do you get from your education if it's not the facts and the ideas and the knowledge, in inverted commas? What is the residue? What is left of education? And then it's also partly about the curriculum, what you do get in school, and the usefulness or lack of usefulness of a fair proportion of it. And also a cry for things to be put onto the curriculum. So there are 11 main chapters that detail patterns of things that people told me in the interviews. Two things that they've said have been absolutely essential would be digital proficiency, which of course on the whole school ignores, because schools don't really want you to have your phone, and they don't, and there isn't really the money for en masse children to be working with online facilities in school. And another one was confidence. Lots and lots of people told me, who on the face of it were very confident people, that they'd learnt confidence after school. And whilst confidence isn't on the curriculum as a subject in the way that history or geography are, I think we need to look at ways of building in opportunities for you to feel confident in your reading, in your writing, in your speaking, in your listening, in your engagement with the people around you, so that you have the skill of articulacy when you move into the adult world.
Wow. I mean, it's interesting. I knew you from years ago. I used to work at Aisha Cocoa in Belper. Lovely little shop. Go and try it out. And I'd just seen you around, and I really enjoyed seeing you and giving you coffees with Rachel, your wife. And you were somebody I just got on with. I remember that. I was just always got on with you. We had a nice chat, but that was it. I didn't know what you did or where you were from, really. We just had a nice chat. Now, later on, I come back. I went to Australia. I'd done my thing, come back, and I saw you at an open mic, and that's where we really met again. All your family are incredible people, all performers. You've got the nicest family I've ever met, and I love them all. And I saw you, and I recognised you, but I wasn't ready to go up. I was like, I know him from somewhere, I can't remember. And then I performed, and it clicked on stage. I was like, oh, the Aisha Cocoa couple. Like, hello. It was a moment.
I've been called worse.
Yeah. I need to get off this stage and have a chat. And then we did. I went and spoke to you, and you gave me a business card. You were working at Sheffield Hallam at the time, and asked me to go in, and that was straight away. I was up like going back into education, and I sort of had to say, I got kicked out of school. I had a very bad time there. Are you sure you want me to come in and tell your teachers how to behave and act in the classroom? And you're like, yeah, I'm sure it's a great idea. So then we started going to different places together, education. We went into your university, and I was just getting glimpses of the other side of the fence, like all the stick that I give the teachers before. I was seeing the teachers and getting their end of the bargain. But during that, we were taking some photos of like, you know, here's us at Hertfordshire, or here's us at Sheffield Hallam. And then I go to gigs after that, and it'd be a bit annoying because I do, you know, put my heart and soul into this poem I performed on stage, and I get off and I'd get people come to me, and I really thought they were coming to congratulate me or say something nice. And I was like, hey, mate, yeah. And they're like, do you hang around with that Martin Illingworth? And then I was like, yeah. And I'm being really honest here, everybody, and that I'm talking hundreds of people, have just said the nicest things about you. And it's always often like they've been taught by you, or so they've had this experience with you. I get emotional because I'm like, you are such a cool person. And I just, that whatever you did in your classrooms, whatever you did in your school experience, has had such a big effect. You've turned into a little local celebrity around here in that sector. How does that feel? I don't know if you have that experience much, or you get in the pub and it comes across. And also, you could have finished that. You could have had your 24 years in education, enjoyed it, gone, yeah, wicked, I've done what I needed to do, get out. But you've also gone on to write 2 books. You've gone on to keep going into classrooms and trying to reach out and help people, because you're seeing the world's moving and people aren't going with it. How is it all, like, why have you got such a thirst to carry on with that?
I think when I was working in a school in Derby, I worked there for a lot of years. The last school that I worked at as a full-time teacher, and I could have stayed there and retired there, and, you know, seen my days out, and got to, well, they keep moving the retirement age, but, you know, got to 97 and retired. But I was getting increasingly anxious about what schooling was becoming, the way that schools were being measured against each other, and the way that it started to feel a little bit like the kids were at the school for the school and not for the kids, and that you know, schools were anxious about kids doing as well as they were supposed to do, so that they didn't let the school down. Is kind of how it started to feel, and increasingly it feels. And that goes against what I feel teaching is about. I think exams should just be a thermometer reading of how things are going. You know, every now and again you need to reflect on the learning that you're doing and whether you're making any progress. That's the limit of examinations. But of course, examinations have a built-in problem for people, and the problem is, for an exam to work, people can't all do the same. They can't all achieve. They can't all pass, because if everybody passes, then the basic function of an exam is lost. Exams are sorting hats, to borrow from Harry Potter. These people have done this well, these people have done not so well, and these people have done even worse. And that means for us to have winners, we have to have losers. And I think that's a very disappointing basis on which to regulate education. So also in this book, I have been talking about getting rid of exams altogether. And interestingly, of course, coronavirus has done exactly that. This year, GCSEs and A-levels are not going to be sat in a boiling hot gym under great pressure, and instead the teachers are going to be allowed to talk about and to assess how well the children did. And of course, you know, in stable situations, for a GCSE, you'll have had the same teacher for 2 years. And that person is going to know much better what you deserve and what your capacities are and what acumen you have, because they've worked with you for 2 years. So my proposal is that we get rid of exams and instead they're replaced with an e-portfolio of the things that you can do, not the things you can't do, all the things that you can do. So a library of the books that you've read, a list of the experiences that you've had, tributes from people who've worked with you across different subjects, and so that those people can say what levels you've reached. Are you capable? Are you competent? Are you expert? What levels have you reached within those things? And I would contend that portfolio should stay with you all your life. I think young people have started to recognise the limits of the value of an exam. They know it's just cram, revise, go in a hall, feel some pressure and adrenaline. If you can do it, you can do it. If you can't, you won't show your best. But then you and I know, everybody knows, you take an exam, and the first thing you do after the exam is forget everything immediately.
What are them 2 pieces of information you've still got? You know the capital of Brazil, don't you?
It's Brasilia, thank you, yes.
I remember you saying that.
Actually, that's the only thing I've remembered
got out
from
of geography.
school. And I have an A-level in geography, so that advanced study has helped me remember one piece of information. And the other answer to that question, although I feel that first answer was pretty good, but here comes another one.
Oh, thank God.
Is that
here we go.
The other misgiving I have is that this focus on exams is not what the teacher-pupil relationship should be. The relationship should be more holistic than that. And when you very kindly said that we keep bumping into millions of people in lots of different cities.
It does happen, doesn't it?
It did happen in London, didn't it? As soon as we got off the train. My wife laughs every time this happens, of random people coming up and saying, "You used to teach me," and things like that. It's relationships are the things. If you find your teacher a conducive person, if you find them a person worth listening to, if you imagine that person cares about you to a certain extent, then you're going to work for that person and you're going to work for yourself. And actually indicating that there is some reason to go to school is really important. So I always like to try my lessons, we might be reading some old novel or poetry or something in one of my English lessons, but I always used to try and tell the children as they came in what the value of being there was today. The ways in which reading this poem or working on a novel or working on our writing was going to improve life chances.
Did that replace the learning objectives on the board then? Did you still have to jot them down? And
I have to say, my learning objectives on the board might be quite thin over my career. I wasn't a great one for doing that.
Just such a passive start of the classroom, isn't it? You go in, she goes and messes about, and then it's like, right, write down whatever's on the board. That's what you're doing today. You're just like, okay, you really care about this, don't you? You're really invested.
And actually, finding the thing that makes a person, the thing that drives them, their interest. I mean, you were saying when I met you in Nottingham when you were performing, and we had a conversation, I said, why don't you come to university and help me do my poetry session with trainee teachers? And I could see that you'd rather pluck all your eyebrows out because it sounded like a really stressful situation. But you just demonstrated to me that your thing was public speaking, was performance, and also you demonstrated to me you were excellent at it as well. And sometimes I think that is the job of a teacher, is just to be a cajoler, just to be a person, somebody, a backer, somebody who's just going to back somebody and keep pushing them forward and saying, go on, you can do this. You can do this.
It was you that helped me help Chrissy out, actually, my partner, who's a teacher. And she went into the first classroom that she'd ever been into, and she was really nervous and had all these tools and ideas and things she was going to teach them, and they just weren't engaging. So she came home, and obviously, like most teachers, as you know, you teach lots of NQTs, get emotional, get built up from it, like, oh, this is not for me. And we just said, let's go to the drawing board. Let's think about this. why would they want to listen to you? Why do they want to be in that classroom? And we just had a good chat about it. And I was thinking of things that you'd said to me on our long journeys away. But it was like, yeah, be a person they can invest in. You've got so many interesting things that make you you. You've got passions. You're a roller derby, I don't know, skater, performer. You're into roller derby, all these things. Take that into your classroom. Take your passions in and see if that sort of spreads the fire a little bit. If that enlightens them. And the next day she took a little a PowerPoint up, showed the farm that she lived on, showed some buses ideas that she had, all these things, and they were just so in on it, and all the lesson plan around that, because she does art and engineering and things like that. They were tailoring it to her, and they were thinking about roller skates and thinking about buses and all these things, and they're invested in her then. And at the end she had some of the kids come up and go, oh miss, I'm really into X, Y and Z, and they invested back into her, and it then created that friendship. What I love about you, when we go to all these places, you give some great anecdotes and you talk about these people you've met. Like you've got a film out on YouTube that everybody needs to see. I love it. The only fresh air is outside in the yard, and it follows this small child, and he's going around and nobody's taking notice until one day is in the paper, and then the head teacher decides to goes, oh, I didn't know he was into fishing, and goes and has a word with him. I really regret at school I never had any of these anecdotes. I never had a moment of a teacher coming up and finding a bit about me. Apart from one, this is my anecdote, and there was one guy, and it was an English teacher. His name was Mr. Griffiths, and he was fantastic. He was a really, really cool guy. And he just saw something in me, and he'd like you. When he read, everybody went silent. We were all going crazy, like, right, I'm getting a book out, and everyone's like, yes, here we go. And it was his character, and he put all the voices on. The character had just passion with it, and we were in the bottom set in English, and it was all the naughty boys, and we just mouth open, just like, wow. He only lasted a month in our school. They got rid of him straight away, and I was absolutely heartbroken when I went into school this day and I realised he was kicked out, and it was because he thought differently, he acted differently.
I mean, you responded there, to passion, and that's a very difficult emotion not to respond to. You see somebody is really invested in what they're giving you in the lessons, and you will have felt that in some of the times where we've been working at University of Hertfordshire, and we've worked with Year 11 kids who were in peril of not passing their exam, their GCSEs at a good level, and you've had children there who've come and shown you writing that they certainly had never shown anybody else, but it's because they've found your passion is infectious, and it's something that gives people confidence that what they do is worthwhile. So if you're a furtive secret writer, to be encouraged by somebody who you find somebody that you admire or you respect or whatever, and you've seen that, you've seen the value of that. When you've been,
it really is. It's infectious, isn't it? It just it emanates and passes on. When you've been writing this book, you've met lots and lots and lots of young people and entrepreneurial people and trying to make their own way. Is that one thing that really passes on? It's something that you've noticed runs through the book with all these young people, that they're just really devoted and really passionate about whatever it is they're talking about. I've seen you've had landscapers in there, you've had poets, singers and musicians, but it's that passion when they're on their subject, when they're on their thing that is part of them, they can't stop. It's just they want to just keep on. Yeah,
and sometimes, if you are working for yourself, and often the reason people are doing that is that they've a good number of those people had worked for somebody else and basically were having all their great ideas taken off them. A lot of money being made out of those ideas, and them not getting much of that return. So that attitude of I can do better it helped a good number of these people step up. But yeah, that passion is the thing that gets you going. If you're going to set up as a small business, for instance, you're going to have a couple of years, maybe longer, where it's going to be difficult. And who knows how it's going to be now as we come out of the pandemic. Hopefully, touch wood, we come out of the pandemic. Unemployment is going to be rife. We're going into a recession, so making a living is going to be hard.
Even them local and small businesses that think they've made it don't know yet, do they? Like, we don't know when we're going back in. We don't know how they're going to... People aren't going to run out and start spending straight away or anything. It's like a lot of my friends think as soon as Boris says or as soon as the government says, right, that's it, everyone's just going to run, plummet into cuddling each other. And we're going to it's going to be stepping stones constantly. So... It's brittle times for them local businesses now and they need their friends, they need their communities to all push through and help one another out through that.
Yeah, and that partly that's one of the things that I write about in the book. Alongside digital proficiency, it's a proficiency of developing relationships, knowing how to network, knowing how to work the algorithms so that when you're releasing information, you're releasing it at optimum times to get it out to as many people as possible. I mean, it does throw up some difficulties for people because if you, a lot of people seem to be getting their work through Instagram, for instance.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite hard when you're a young person making your way as a self-employed person to not be at work. It's quite hard. If you know that you might miss some work because you've switched your phone off, or you're having a day off, it's actually quite hard to do. And
then that brings up a lot in as well. We say everything's got a byproduct. Mental health is a huge thing now because you don't feel you can switch off at any point. Like me and Chrissy, we've got to come to a point now. We've just said, right, we don't do business at this hour and this hour. It's time to relax as a family and chill out. A lot of my friends just put all this pressure on. I should be creating all the time, or I should be releasing content or bringing things out. Go. And as soon as somebody wants you, you should be on demand. You need to answer that straight away. And I think that's something that took over me for a little while. I started out, put a silly video on, got a few views on it, a bit of response. I was like, oh, that felt nice. Ego boost for a minute. And then after a while, I was just chasing these stats and statistics, and I was forgetting about the art and the process and all these things for a little while. That became the real apparent thing for me, and that was really important. So people also, how great this is, it makes everything so available, it makes people connecting in different ways. We're still human. We've still got a human way of coping with things, and being on so demand it's not realistic, I feel.
I think people are always looking to tomorrow and forgetting about today. And
I'm going to write that down, man. That's beautiful.
That doesn't go in Sue's corner.
No, that's perfect.
That wasn't meant to sound like a soundbite, but what I mean by that is that a lot of people are worrying about when they're going to make it. Two of my children are musicians, and I guess the ultimate goal is to be successful and self-sustaining in that, and to have a big fan base and be able to just do music. But in their journey towards tomorrow, they've managed to play some big gigs, go on tours, and like Sunflower Thieves were over in Holland and Germany. Laurie seems to be gaining in the size of the stages that he can play at and what have you. But you must remember today, if today is always a pursuit of tomorrow, then that's going to be hard work, and that's what you're describing there, where you're putting out content because you and then you get subsumed by how many people have looked at that content. And you're right, in the happenstance of that, the content can then not be your goal, if you like.
Yeah, no, you just forget. I think you said it to me a while back, and I made a song out of it now, obviously.
Hello there, copyright trouble.
Only a tiny smidge. Me and Johnny Ollie, I went to Mount Street Studios and had a little session there. I wasn't feeling my best. I just thought, I'll come down, we'll make some music, but I don't think I'm going to write. And it was the most writing I'd done in a session ever. I was like, I'll get it all out, just purged, and it felt great. And we had this discussion, me and Johnny Ollie and Charlie, who works there, and we were just talking about all the people we know and our friends and young people on this crazy quest at the minute, or trying to make it. And somebody said, I can't remember where it come from, it was like, we're making it. And the song's called Made It. But it's like, yeah, just be proud, just be happy in that pursuit, in fact. But all the steps there, the creative process, the thought of making a song, the going and getting it done, and that's the beauty of it. The end bit, sometimes it feels a little... you've been chasing this thing, you've been ready to get there, and you get to the end bit and you're like, oh no, it was the whole process behind it that's the beauty of it. So that's something I've sort of learnt recently, to be honest, and I think a lot of my friends have come back with a similar response of, you know what, I've got to a really cool stage in my life now, much better stage where I'm like, I just want to get back to making it and creating it again instead of trying to get somewhere. So we're going to write that down on the bus. That's a perfect quote. What was it? Don't live for today. Not. Oh, come on, Martin, you've got me here.
You'll have to play this.
Yeah, we're going to put
back.
it on repeat.
Said something like, you can forget. You might forget today if you're chasing tomorrow. Something like that.
Amen. And you were in school, like, was it one school you were in for 24 years? Was it?
No, I was. No, the last school I was at for a good number of years, and when I the last year I was there, I spent some time still working there, and one day a week I worked at Nottingham University, training teachers, and then the following year I got the job full time at Sheffield Hallam, and then I started working with independent thinking and going around the country, initially by myself, and then more recently most of the time with you. And what I found was, having been in one school for a long time, that was all I really knew about education, was what happened in that school. And my eyes were completely opened in going, I mean, I've been Glasgow in the north, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Canada with it, I've been to the Isle of Man a couple of times, Wales, and then all points in between. And to see how schooling is considered and how it's delivered in lots of different places, it was really illuminating. And you know, it's funny, sometimes people say to me, oh, you don't work in a school anymore, and I think, well, that's not entirely true. I work in about 100 schools every year, and actually my perspective is much broader than when it was in a single school.
I always like it when you say, I know what goes on in my school, but I don't know what goes on all over the world, all over these other schools. And for me, somebody that's been in education for so long, was it, you say you saw it slipping, or you saw it moving, or not moving, in fact, in times. Was that gradual, or was there a jump where you thought, okay, I think somebody needs to speak out now?
Yeah, the introduction of the national curriculum was in part in the 90s, early 2000s, bedding it in, was in part an attempt to control teachers and to create, I suspect, a minimum standard. So the structure of lessons was kind of mapped out for teachers, and they had to stick to having a starter, having those objectives, maybe a starter activity, some reading or modelling or something, and then the kids do something, and then there's a plenary. So it became formulaic in that sense. But in more recent years, the curriculum itself has narrowed to be a response to exams. So rather than the exam being a check on what we've done is just a procession towards the exam. And that obviously narrows down all kinds of subjects just to the core content of what's required in those exams. There was one young person who I interviewed, who I can't remember the quote in the book, but they had brought along all of their exam papers, their Year 11 exam papers, and they said if you look at the questions, if you know, in maths and geography, history and everything, if you just put them all down as a list, and you look at the questions I was asked that was summing up my education, I think they said something like it's a silly rag bag of nonsense, or something like that, you know. Why is Brasilia a distinctive city in Brazil? You know, and then some maths equation, and write a letter to a friend in English or something, and when you look at them together as a composite of how we've measured a child's stay in school from age 4 to age 16.
You've got a bunch of kids writing letters to friends now, have you?
and you know, that's 12 years of being assessed in the sweaty old gym in May and June by this collection, this really strange collection of often abstract and distant topics for people, things that don't impinge on their lives and that they don't have any genuine response to, because they don't really know what it is.
All my learning happened after school, really, all of it. I've just erased everything else. All the books were burnt, gone. And, you know, I'd done a lot of soul searching already. I found a few passions. I found poetry, and then poetry got me into a place of film. I really enjoyed the film aspect of things now, meeting people and gigs. And honestly, if you sat me down now and said, do an exam on Final Cut Pro, which is the film software I use, I'd just be bumbling about, like you saw at the start of the podcast. I'd be like, oh, it's happening now. And I'd completely fail you. But if you give me a bit of time, let me go away, let me find it for myself, go on some YouTube tutorials, look through the internet, spend some time, I promise you I'd come back with a really good product for you. I'd come back with something that I'm really proud of. And that was just something they would never let me do in school. They'd never let you go away and find it for yourself. They're like, this is how you do it, this is what you should be doing, this is how. And I think if they just guided you and said, right, this is, I think you do it in some of your lessons, you've said, what do we want to know? And how are we going to find it? Like, you let everybody sort of go away and find their own way of expressing their learning and expressing.
I know what you mean. What do we know? What don't we know? And what would we like to know?
Yeah, that's it. And but they could go away and choose how they present it. And, you know, for me, I've always found it easier to go away, be on my own, do my own little research, come back and process it and give it. But when somebody was like, this, start reading, and I just get up and I'm like panicking, sweating, standing there shaking, and then I get the class laugh at me, and they've just put me in a horrible situation, and then all I do is associate that with school. Then I associate that with education. It's about making a mock of and standing up and not knowing how to read, so you're just making it up on the spot. It just become a horrible experience for me, but I had skills in a very different way. They just didn't choose to.
I mean, in the 4 or 5 years that I've worked with you, you know, you talk about having to soul search about you as a learner, but the amount that you've learned and taught yourself in that time is vast in terms of even just doing public performances. You know, I mean, you've learned to write poetry that people find engaging, but then you've also learned how to deliver it. And then with your filmmaking, with your podcasts, with all these other things, that, you know, the problem that young people have in school is that one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to get at.
And you know, when you were talking about Chrissy initially struggling with teaching, that could be because, you know, people who get to train as teachers have probably had quite a smooth academic career. They've passed lots of exams, and maybe, you know, when you start to teach, it might be one of the first times in somebody's young life that they're failing at something, and they can't immediately do it.
Yes, okay.
And it feels important because you want to make a career of it and you want to teach, and you beat yourself up about it. And you've probably beaten yourself up about your school career, but it's absolutely plain that learning is one of the things that you're very good at. So that suggests that the clash between you and school wasn't necessarily all your fault.
It was particularly known as a bad school in our area, to be honest. I won't name it, but it's still got its reputation. A really lovely anecdote yesterday. I was just probably playing FIFA actually for a little bit. I had my escapisms as well, and I got a message crop up, and it was somebody who lives on the Elms, sort of like our local estate down there, and I know quite a few of the young people around there. I've been to the school, and one of them just said, "Oh, I've managed to get Final Cut Pro. I got a MacBook. I'm really stuck on something," and he explained to me. I knew exactly what he was struggling with. So we had a Zoom call, and I managed to, which was great because this thing that I helped him with, I struggled for like a week, 2 weeks. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So I managed to pretty much guide him very efficiently. I just got him through it, and he was like, "Yeah, I can do it now." I went out filming, and he reached for that. He wanted it, and I know at school he would never go about trying to ask for help, going and finding them answers from the teachers. And I don't know if it's because they've built a barrier, they don't feel comfortable, but to go on and Facebook and sort of reach out and just say, "Do you know how to do this?" It was something I never imagined that person doing. I couldn't see him in school ever, even, well, he'd probably come to me and like whisper it, but I couldn't imagine going to a teacher and being like, "Help me with this." There's a pride there that they don't want to let off. So I quite enjoy these changing times, but people are so scared of change as well. So with your book coming out, and there's a lot of change in there. There's a lot of like, the world is changing. Have you found any people reluctant to it and just gone, "No, it's all nonsense, it's all liberal jabber rabber, like get rid of that"? They just don't like change. What?
Yeah, I mean, change is quite unsettling for anybody who's in charge, because they're in charge now, and presumably they'd like to stay that way.
Yeah.
I think there's a quotation I borrowed from somebody in my reading quite near the start of that book that says, "I don't know why people are so scared of new ideas. I'm scared of the old ones."
True.
And I think that John Cage, that is, and that's what that's it. That's what that book is. That's what it is. It's just that I feel that schooling has gone down a rabbit hole and it needs bringing back up.
Is there quite a lot of practical ideas in there? I know you've got a first book out as well, the Think Before You Teach, with lots of practical ideas. We've been to a conference before where somebody's listed all the things wrong with the world or what's happening and just gone, "And what are you going to do?" And sort of like got his coat on and legged it and gone. And all the teachers are there bamboozled, like, what are we going to do? Have you got things in the book where you're saying, "This is where we need to go," or "This is what's next"?
Yeah, okay, I'll have a look. There are the chapters with the things that the young people told me who were interviewed, and then in my response, I'll just briefly tell you some headings. I did a chapter near the end called "What Can Schools Do Right Now to Avoid Being Left Behind?" And in there you've got explicitly teach confidence, teach digital proficiency, teach money management, promote strategies for well-being. Interestingly, a lot of young people who are successful in managing their emotions see it as not as a remedial thing that needs sorting out when you're unhappy, but actually you need to think about your happiness. And like you were saying, where you and Chrissy have times where you're not at work,
managing that happiness, like finding a way of bringing it. Yeah, that's great.
Make sure that young people leave school fully prepared for the world of work. promote opportunities for independent thinking and collaborative projects, reinstate the school trip immediately, rethink the role of the teacher, make social and emotional skills a priority, abolish school uniform, and support staff in recognising change and its impact on their practice would be some examples there.
Wow, guys, if you're into teaching, get that book. If you're not, just get that book. It's got so much in there that, because again, the parents a lot of the time have associated bad experiences with school, and they send the child off there, but they don't want to be involved in it. They don't want to. It's such important. Everyone needs to play their part in this changing time. I know so many friends that have just become parents as well, and they're just so nervous about, like, what are we bringing our kids up into? And me and Chrissy, I'm going to be a dad.
Yeah, congratulations.
Here we go, having it. But I need things like this because I'm worried. I do genuinely think about what's next. Like, and being from that bad experience that I've spoke about, I don't want to ever send my child into that war zone.
Well, you'll have heard the Sude's Corner. This might help you. The reason to, lots of people think that they shouldn't bring children into this world, so they don't have a kid. The reason to bring children into the world is so that it can change it.
That's not going into Sude's Corner, surely. That's beautiful.
That's a healthy way of thinking about change.
Honestly, I'm going to remember that one. From everything we spoke about, that's beautiful. Hit me here. Martin, I know you've got places to be as well. I know.
My house.
You'd like to, you'd like to be, on this show for as long as you can. It's a lovely place to be on this bus. But I'm going to let you get home to the family.
Okay.
Will you pass the love on
I will
from
do.
me?
And thank you for inviting me on.
Honestly, thank you so much for being here. The Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm learning. It's all new to me. We're going to get there. I like meeting people. I love meeting people with great stories. And I love meeting genuine, honest legends like Martin Illingworth. Please get the book. It's called Forget School. It's just fantastic. He's fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm out. I get attachment issues. I can't leave.